welcome to SC Thrive's Mental Health Matters. Our subject today is caring for the first responder spouse. We really appreciate you being here today. We want to remind you that we do this platform the second and fourth Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. To give you a preview of the 24th of September's program, it will be on post-traumatic stress disorders. We hope that you'll follow up with us at 11:30 on the 24th. We want to tell you about Mental Health Matters and also SC Thrive's mission. And SC Thrive's mission is to lead South Carolinians to stability by providing innovative and efficient access to quality of life resources. We are so fortunate, as Eva said, to have Guy and Cindy Van Horn with us. Guy is a 40-year veteran of the Charleston County Sheriff's Department, and he and his wife are really active in supporting the Charleston County Sheriff's Department employees, SC LEAP, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program, and also the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team. It's so good to have you all here today.
Thank you, George. Glad to be here.
We want to go ahead and start, first of all, tomorrow. It tugs heavy at our hearts, being 9/11, and many of us remember where we were that day. We also realize the impact that this has on responders every day throughout South Carolina and the United States. First responders are always at the forefront of each incident or disaster as they ensure the safety and well-being of the population. Just as on September 11th, where responders were running in, others were running out, and that's typically what happens on a scene, is the responders are going into the incident, and unfortunately sometimes for the safety of the citizens, they are seeking safety outside of the scene. It's important to know, though, that first responders are at greater danger of being exposed to traumatic situations that pose the risk of harm to them or the people under their care. This constitutes a great risk for the behavioral health of first responders, putting them at risk for stress, PTSD, depression, substance abuse, suicide ideation, and attempts. Guy, you've seen this over your 40 years. Being in Charleston, y'all have been exposed to many events. You and I both spoke of our time working in Charleston during Hurricane Hugo. Can you just speak to the impact that being a first responder has on the responder?
Sure. Like you had mentioned, George, I remember 9/11, and I was a captain in the detective office at the time, and we had the TVs on that morning, and just to see that horror. And we gathered up in the detective bay, and we prayed for our country, prayed for those folks that were affected that day, and had no idea from that morning we would still be walking in those footsteps of what was created that morning. And the sidelight of it propelled us into the traumatic responses, like you talked about. It brought those things, PTSD and stress and the suicide tendencies that were kind of dealt with in the military or dealt with in a wartime situation. It really brought those to the forefront and sort of exploded on the first responder scene as things that we had been dealing with for years, but we just hadn't put a name to it until we started walking through the steps after 9/11.
That's right. And Cindy, first responder marriages or marriages in which at least one spouse is involved in public safety. We all know of a lot of marriages where the husband and wife or spouses have joined and fallen in love with each other. You and your husband, my wife and I, we met in the back of an ambulance caring for a child that we transported to Charleston. So, whether it be a police officer, a firefighter, an EMT, or another public servant, it's important to remember that there's a high risk of marital disharmony, infidelity, and divorce. We all know, as we've spoken before, that it means lots of long hours. Guy, you and I, the amount of hours that we put in Hugo, and then every event since then has really been big. And what we were enduring in Hugo was not as much in forefront as things are now after 9/11. And even now with hurricanes, where you and I, we were all out on the road when the wind was at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. Now we do have standards in place where we tell the public that we're not going to go out if once the weather gets past this point. But Cindy, first responders work long hours. They face frequent danger. They witness countless traumatizing events, and they can't help but bring that home.
Yeah.
And, I guess, how long was it till you felt comfortable in looking at Guy and saying, hey, do you want to talk about it?
Well, we met in high school, and then Guy went in the Air Force, and we got married, and he went straight from the Air Force to Charleston County Sheriff's Office. So we've got 40 years of growing. So when we were newly married, it's rough. It's, you've got, both of you have dreams and things you want to do, and you're facing, just the normal married couple stuff, money and where to live and jobs and all that. Then add in all those hours and the stress that's related to it, the trauma, because it's purely trauma. Every day they can witness a trauma. Or multiple traumas. They go from one call to the next, and you never know. One could be something minor, and the next one might not be. And they'll have a whole range of that all day long. So it does take its toll. So it wasn't until I made a choice. We went to the first funeral of a law enforcement officer killed in the line of duty. And I was riding in the car with Guy and said, I'm going to ask you this once. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And he said, yep. I said, okay, then I'm going to find a way to live with it. And so we did. And so it's a growing process, and you have to find what works for you, and you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to be at peace, knowing that he's out there serving a bigger need than I ever will. But it wasn't until we really found a strong faith and a strong community outside of law enforcement that really helped us balance out that stress. We were able to leave the stress that someone in public service lives under and get into where we felt like we could be more normal. We could laugh, we could have friends over and kids to play around, and we developed such strong, deep friendships. So it's a great job and a great line, but you do have to work at it.
Guy, how hard was it for you to communicate with Cindy about what you were going through?
As a young man, it was very difficult. I didn't have many models around me to look at as far as how to properly communicate with your wife. I had a hard enough time expressing my love for her as I would expressing what I saw at work, the horrors that first responders see at work. No one ever really educates us about how to communicate that. And especially as a young man, a young first responder, you don't want to appear weak to anyone in the world, let alone your spouse. So I'm afraid we make bad choices where we try to hide those emotions and those feelings. And truthfully, by doing that, it really affects our overall wellness, emotional wellness, and physical wellness. And it really starts weighing on us. And you'll start to dig a deep hole if someone doesn't give you some assistance with how to communicate and how to share what you're feeling. You pray that your spouse is that one person that you can trust and you can share your heart with. We talk about the vision of what goes on for the first responder, and you don't have to come home and share the horrors of the call of what you saw with your spouse. A lot of folks we refer to as the Disney version. I'll come home and say, hey, I had a rough call and this is how I'm feeling about it. So she knows my emotions without knowing so much the gory details of the incident. And that's all she cares about is me and our feelings and how we move forward from there.
I'm so glad that y'all brought that up. You know, it's tough on the responder to come home and not feel like it's all about me. And in this next slide that we have, obviously we talk about communication and the opportunity to get out. You and Cindy and Gina and I, we have what are called our date nights, and that's where we will get together and have some of the hard have a better place for some good conversations and just be able to step out of the house.
Yeah,
There's a big stigma, obviously, in public safety about mental health, and you know, when we're out on the street, it is hard on us to know that we're responding to an incident, and at the same time, our families are at home. Our families may be facing challenges, and that's really tough. And so just the way that y'all have described the way that you work things out and the way that you rely on each other is helpful to all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We want to talk about the Legos of life.
Yes.
And this is sort of what I was just speaking about is, you know, we may work the night shift, we may work 24-hour shifts, we may work the day shift, and then we come home and we step on a Lego. In our home now, we have a empty nest except for 2 dogs. So now our Legos are now dog bones, and one of those I actually stepped on last night. And so it's easy for us if we don't try and communicate and hold it together, that can be the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For either one of us, we can lash out at our spouse, we can lash out at our kids. Tube of toothpaste, once you squeeze it, you can't put it back in, and once
Exactly.
you say it, you can't take it back.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of challenges for a public safety spouse, and keeping both spouses trying to contribute and keep the home together, and cook and sort of show a love language to each other is really big. This next subject that we're going to speak about, the word burnout is really tough for public safety responders to speak of, because there are different pieces of information that speak to us about whether it is actually burnout or not. You know, we're going to talk about 5 different phases. One of the phases is that honeymoon phase. And that's when, Guy, you spoke about, and Cindy, you spoke about being in the military, and, you know, Guy's in front of the mirror and he's looking at that sharp dressed man in his uniform, and That's a big snag when you're going out to reach out to a woman. That uniform can be a great hook, and it worked for me. And but then there's that time where the honeymoon's sort of over, and it
Right.
gets tough, and it's no longer that person that we saw go out in that press uniform. They may not be taking time to press their uniform. They may be wearing down and going
Yeah.
out at the last minute,
Right.
calling in sick. It goes from honeymoon to onset of stress, and then it becomes chronic stress. And
Yes.
chronic
Yeah.
stress can be just like a chronic illness, and it can just eat away at us. You and I Guy, are very fortunate that we have incredible wives that have gotten us in through over 30 years of service. And you with your 40 years and myself with over 35 years, our wives are a rock. And that's why it really helps us. Could you speak a little bit about habitual burnout, where we may go away for a little bit and okay, we feel like, all right, the burnout's gone or the stress is gone,
Yeah.
only to jump back in and go, oh no, it's back.
Right. Yeah, I think the reality that I'd love to share with the audience is we as first responder administrators and organizations, we don't do a good job informing our new responders and their spouses that there's a price to pay. Being a first responder is what we believe to be a calling, and it's a great calling. EMTs saving lives, firefighters rushing into burning buildings, police officers out there on the front lines every day. It's rewarding, but the families have to realize that there's a price to pay. When you want to be a first responder and you talk to your spouse and you're full of excitement, the spouse wants to encourage you. We all go to some type of academy, some type of training. And while that training's going on, the spouse is holding down the fort so you can be successful. And I believe over the years, what we've found is the spouse thinks, once my law enforcement provider gets out of this training, our life is going to be back to normal. And what we don't realize and what we don't say is, well, that normal is going to be a new normal because your spouse is going to be missing soccer games and missing birthday parties and missing holidays because they have to work. We're in hurricane season, and you had alluded to Hugo. Now they realize that their first responder is working emergency shifts, and they're at home making decisions about how they're going to batten down the hatches with kids and dogs, and are they going to evacuate? The stress is on everyone in the law enforcement family, and they quickly see that, hey, this is rewarding, but hey, there's a price to pay. And we encourage everyone to have a priority. The only way this works is if your number one priority is your spouse and your family. It's got to come before your career. You've got to put that first, so when emergencies do come, you've already taken care of the most important things in your life, and then you can focus on providing care for the public.
Cindy, as Guy alluded to it, you're having to be home, you're having to batten down the hatches. Gina and I have gotten better about having our little emergency kits, and we've gotten into the generator days and that sort of thing. But what is your emergency kit look like? Not just the material emergency kit, but being able to batten down the hatches while Guy's gone.
Well, just it evolved over time, and with our kids, they got used to it too. And so I want to highlight what Guy said about building our relationship outside of those emergency times, because one of the things that we did when he was newer in the force, his days off were in the middle of the week. So at least once a year, like usually before Christmas, I would take days off of work, the same 2 days off of work, and we would do our Christmas shopping and we would get our stuff done while the kids were in school. And so we started developing that relationship way early. And so because we developed the relationship and the way to communicate, then it was easier for me to be able to step into a role during emergency time, knowing that I had his full backing, his full blessing. We had already worked through the material needs. I could call him at any point in time. This was before cell phones, so anytime I could get him on a phone, which was not always easy, so we always had great communication that was always improving. It's still improving. It's because it changes no matter what phase of life you're in. Your communication style has to change with it. So yeah, I can.
Cindy,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I had a question about burnout. So, people always talk about rank structure, and you always want to let your spouse know what's going on. But when you see, let's say you saw a guy going into burnout, is it always best to use the rank structure to let them know because of the stigma? Or do you go to others for help?
I don't believe there's an always, because I think each situation is going to be a little different. For a spouse, if you've got, if you're feeling your own kind of stress and burnout, then you and your spouse, your law enforcement or first responder other half, can go to the employee assistance program. Every department has an employee assistance program that offers free counseling for the first responder and family. So that's a great resource. Here at Charleston County Sheriff's Office, we have Guy is here as a peer support, and we have several trained peer support people here within the agency. I'm a spouse peer trained, so we always offer that as an option. If you need somebody to talk to one-on-one that can understand your situation without you having to explain it, it makes all the difference in the world. And as far as the rank structure goes, it's not going to be easy for any first responder to hear that their spouse went to some supervisor. That's not preferred, unless you get into a situation where there's possible harm to you or your loved ones. That just is a difficult thing to do in a paramilitary structure. So find somebody. We have South Carolina LEAP, who's the law enforcement assistants. They are also working with fire departments and EMS departments, getting similar programs for the responders and their families. And we also have chaplains. We have here locally, we have the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy. Also through Eric Skidmore, through the South Carolina LEAP, there's chaplains available there. And your department may have a chaplain assigned to them. So there are options, lots of options.
That's a perfect intro to this next slide that basically says it's not impossible. It's not impossible. There's recovery and there's hope. And Guy, you used the word normal earlier. We have folks that are watching, and we want to tell the folks that are watching today, please, if you'd like, there's a chat option for Zoom, and you are more than welcome to click on the chat, and this is an open forum. You can ask us anything that you want. And we're just fortunate to have people from public safety on today, some of which are going to school at night to become EMTs and paramedics, some that are already in the hospital. But we want people to know, as you said, Eric and SC LEAP and the SC FAST program, they're wanting people to know that it's okay. It's all right to be broken. It's all right to not to be normal. That this vision of normal sometimes is that picture on that magazine in the magazine rack at the store, and it's computer enhanced to make it look like that's the normal. but it's very easy for us to get beyond this. And thank you so much for mentioning about the EAP programs. It was frustrating for Gina not to know about EAP 30 years into our marriage, and so that's a big deal. Uh, Guy and Cindy, how I know that you spoke that there's a newsletter that you put out to the spouses. What a great way of letting them know about things like insurance renewals and EAP and other programs that are there for the spouse and the family.
Yeah, one of the hardest things that we struggle with, like any organizations, is communication. And the organizations can put out a lot of good communications from human resources about different resources that are out there for the first responder and their family. And a lot of times, it's led by a spouse and her daughter who's also a spouse. And the lead person actually works inside the agency as well. So she's aware of a lot of information, and then she turns around and puts it out on the Facebook page where she can communicate needs, she can communicate information, and it's really becoming a wealth of a reliable, safe information that's getting out to our spouses. But we struggle to find better ways to communicate with law enforcement spouses, because sometimes we find that they can feel isolated, that they're alone. But then when they touch and tap into one of these groups, they realize, hey, there are a lot of people that are like me that are struggling for information and feeling a little alone. And there's nothing like finding somebody who's in the same boat you're in to walk through that thing with you.
That's exactly right. And sometimes in this day and time, unfortunately, there's a lot of single parents out there. There's a lot of people that are in public safety that are single parents. And so that this information can also be for their family. Grandmothers and grandmothers and grandfathers are now raising kids while the public safety employee is out at work. We want to talk about how both spouses in this next slide, they can feel like the world's on their shoulder, that they're carrying it all on their own. And I just got through a study. There's a great book by Max Lucado, and he wrote a book called Traveling Light. And guys, as you spoke about, you know, when we started, things were a little slower, and so we had a lot of mentors in the departments. Now things are a whole lot faster, and you may see a police car at the corner of East Bay and Meeting Street, and they're sitting there because it's moving so fast, and that's the best place for them to be. Or the EMS unit that is sitting out on Cosgrove Avenue at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so we really don't have to carry it all alone. And what is one or two ways that y'all are portraying that to people in public safety in Charleston?
The one thing that we'd like to really put out to the group is life is hard. Whether you're a first responder family or not, life is hard and life is difficult, and hard times are going to come. And we find that you really have to practice resiliency. And what we mean by that is you need to take care of your relationships. You need to work on your marriage, your communication. You need to work on your parenting. You need to work on your field, whatever first responder you are, be the best you can. resiliency groups. When times are good or slower, as you alluded to, George, those are the times that we need to invest in ourselves with nutrition and exercise and learning the best way to relax and do things, because in the midst of a crisis is not the time to Google the how-to. You want to already know how to, because in the midst of the crisis, you want to try to be at your best, so you can be as strong as you can for those around you.
And you know, that's a phrase that we've used for a long time, that we want the public to see us at our best when they are at their worst. And but there are going to be times where we're going to be at our worst, and
Right.
and we have to be resilient. And this next piece is two words that weren't part of my vocabulary this time last year, is self-care. I didn't know what that looked like. I had a dear friend that unfortunately made a permanent decision to a temporary situation, and his brother spoke that he knew how to help everybody but himself. And in emergency management, we look at all the things man-made and natural that can affect us, whether that be on the coast or here in Columbia. And then we look at, okay, well, how do we prepare ourselves for that? And then obviously there are times where those things happen and we have to respond. And then we have the recovery phase. And you both spoke about those times where we have to maximize the time where we're in the recovery phase and the preparation phase, that we can build up our walls, that we can mend things that have been torn because of all the response that we do. And so among the words that you see in front of you, they include positive self-talk and how important that is. But one of the other things that we're going to talk about is also finances, and how finances is a big divider, even in public safety families. And how, Guy and Cindy, what was one or two tools that you've used to address that?
We realized early on, as with most first responders, that overtime is available, and also off-duty employment is available. And I think all of us, as we enter into that and we start making a little money on the side, we see benefits of that. But sometimes where we go wrong is we'll invest too much time in working off-duty or overtime and justify it that, hey, we're going to pay off this bill or we're going to buy this vacation trip. And at the end of the day, what's really happened is we've isolated ourselves from one another. It may have been a good intent in the beginning, but what we've done is we've made our marriage and our relationship weaker. So you really have to balance. We suggest that you get involved in a good budgeting program, a good mentoring program where you learn and the dollars that you do have work for you better. You try to avoid debt. Once you get into debt, it's just a tough hole to climb out of. And as a young couple, if you can prevent that, you're really going to save yourselves a headache. But we encourage first responder spouses, couples, to go through budgeting together, to work on your money together, to have a shared account, to know that you have agreed together on where you're going to spend your money. And if you can do that, it's going to really cut down on the conflicts that arise from any couple as they navigate through life and how they want to spend their money.
Just as we have a hard time and we don't want to talk to our spouse about what we're experiencing at work, the trauma and everything else, we can end up working overtime or working a side job. And an incredible man by the name of George Walker told me one day, he said, "George, you never dig a hole to fill a hole." And and you spoke about that we can really dig a hole, and that's why it's important for us, just like we come home and talk uh, about things that we wouldn't typically talk about with our wives or husbands, that if we are going to get that extra check, or we are going to get that overtime, that sometimes we can tell our spouse, hey, I need you to tuck this away. And because quite frankly, it can be a lot easier. My wife is a whole lot easier at being a minimalist than I am, and taking her lunch and doing things like that. We want to continue to talk about optimistic communication, and this picture is worth 1,000 words. That just what it means. We all spoke about what it means for us to get together with people offline, to get together with people away from work, and that somehow those people that don't know what we do, in one way or another, those questions, so what's the worst thing you've ever seen? Or I guess you had a hard time the other night, that those aren't the conversations that pop up when
Right.
we're in our safe time.
Right. They don't. But you have to build those relationships. At the beginning of any relationship or friendships, people are always going to be a little curious. But if you stick in there long enough and you build the relationships, and you speak honestly, like that's, now I don't really want to talk about that now. You develop a way of communicating without having to tell all the stories. We've got some friends that we've been friends with for 20 years or more that probably don't know 1/10 of the stories that Guy has, or that Guy and I have. And they don't, but it doesn't matter. That's not why they like us or why we like them, and that's not why we do life together. We are there to love and support one another, not just, hear the latest, greatest stories. Well, chase them, shoot them stories.
And there's two sides to every pancake. Sometimes we as responders have to understand that sometimes that man or woman that we're talking to is just trying to make conversation. They're just trying to find level ground to talk to us. And heaven forbid that somebody ever calls me an ambulance driver, and then it's just like saying the word Niagara Falls, and but people just don't know. They see that you're in an ambulance and that you're driving the ambulance. So that, the average person doesn't know the difference between an investigator and a patrolman, or a firefighter and an engineer, or an EMT and a paramedic. They just don't know. And so we do have to be forgiving in those first stages of our relationships with other people.
Yeah.
We want to move on, and we're going to close out here in just a minute, but we do want to talk about an incredible tool that doesn't cost anything other than a piece of paper and a pen, that we can sit down with a piece of paper and make our own journals, and we can write down when we're on top of the mountain, when we're out of the valley and we're kind of climbing out of the valley and we're getting towards the mountain, to the top of the mountain, where we can talk about the things that we're grateful for. You both of you, Guy and Sydney, mentioned about 40 years of all the things that you can be grateful for, and all the things that a lot of people that are on this Zoom call today, all the things that they're grateful for. So it's important for us to journal those things, so that when we end up back down in that valley, that we can look back and say, hey, we made it through this. Y'all want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I journal, today I journal. I've been journaling for about 5 months, and Lord knows I wish I would have had the discipline or found it earlier in my career, because I had received journals or picked journals up all through my career, but it just never stuck. But now I've really enjoyed journaling and found it really therapeutic, if you will. I can be kind of a nuts and bolts and into the facts kind of guy, but when I find that journaling gives me the opportunity to write down what I feel about things and what I think about things, and then I also, being a little older, you start thinking about your children and your grandchildren and a legacy, and how much I would love to have a journal that maybe my father would have wrote as a young man, and or my mother would have penned when she was a teenager. I've found old Bibles where my parents, as young people, maybe just wrote a sentence or something like that about a scripture or something they enjoyed, and I treasure that. And if I had a whole journal full of those things, how valuable it would be. So that's really fallen on me, and something that I'd like to. It's therapeutic as you do it, but it would mean the world to your children and grandchildren.
I have a dear friend that journals, and he is much more disciplined than I would ever be, and he has taken his journals. We've known each other since 1999, and he's taken his journals and actually had them bound for his kids. And and there's other the hardest thing that could be the easiest thing for me, and I was never able to do it, was to sit down with my dad, take my phone and just videotape and say, hey, tell me about this or tell me about that.
Yeah.
One of my uncles did that. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and so one of his nephews did a recording. But it's just easy for us to do that, because right now, in what we're facing, we're looking back to 1918 of what they did, and right now we're making history. And so our children and our children's children, it would be so comforting for them to know that we went through some tough times.
Yeah. George, I really like the screen that's up, slide that's up, because remembering the things that you've been grateful for over the years can turn your attitude around in the worst of times. It can just give you that glimmer of hope that you need to get through to the next day. So keeping a written journal of the things that you're grateful for will give you a lifetime of hope.
The other thing is, it takes the focus for that time. Just taking that pen and being in a quiet place and writing on that paper can take your focus off of what you're going through, and give you so that time that you're writing on that paper and journaling is actually medicinal for you, and you don't even realize it. One of the other things that we want to talk about today and mention are, just as you said, there are some resources that we have out there, which include SC Leap and SC Fast, but we also have some resources that are here online. You will also be able to find these on our SC Fast website, as well as this recording when this is over, and give us a little bit of time to edit the video in that so we can get it back up. But you see the SC Leap piece here, and Eric lives a stone's throw from me, and he has been a pillar for me in my life, and he is an example of what one person can do, because what he has done in South Carolina has now been mirrored in North Carolina and Virginia and several other states.
I believe it's 11 states now.
Yeah, and so that I think that takes Guy and Cindy. I think that takes us to one other chunk that what the power of one is, what the power of one spouse is, what the power of one spouse group, that we shouldn't discount what we can do. And well, that seems like a good idea, or say, well, you know, so and so did that, but it never worked.
Right.
Well, maybe it didn't work.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to reach out to them and find out, well, what did they face? And that way we're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
But we shouldn't discount, as you both said, everybody's been given gifts, and you may have that gift that can make a difference with spouses and with employees and employers in the future.
Yeah.
The end of this month, SC Thrive is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we will be having a virtual conference. We encourage you to go to our SC Thrive website and look at registering for this event. There is a small registration fee, but it's an opportunity for you to hear some incredible speakers. I also want, Guy and Cindy and I have been speaking about finances. We want you to know that you can call our 800 number. You can call our contact center. These are our sponsors, but you can call our contact center. People in public safety are not immune from having trouble paying their rent. People in public safety are not immune from trying to keep the bills paid. And the other piece is that we in public safety need to know that there is a 800 number that we can give people when we respond to them and say, you know, what you're going through, it's not in my tool belt to help you, but here's a phone number of a organization that can help you, and that empowers us as a responder.
Yeah.
Eva, do you have anything else for us before we sign off?
I just would like to thank Guy and Cindy for speaking to our audience and us today and blessing us with your experiences and your advice.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank everybody for being online with us today. Again, this program will be available in a week or so, and we ask that you take the opportunity to be back with us September 24th at 11:30 when we talk about post-traumatic stress. Guy and Cindy, thank you again. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.